This video will cover how to measure your cylinder and your pistons on page 3 of your packet. The items you'll need to complete this cylinder bore measurement include a micrometer, a telescoping gauge, and your engine block. When measuring the cylinder bore, we're going to measure the cylinder bore in 6 different locations. We're doing this because we're looking to see if the cylinder is out around at any of the spots or if there's a taper to our cylinder. When measuring D1, we'll start 3/4 of an inch below the top of the cylinder and parallel to the crankshaft. To measure D1, I'll start by selecting the correct size telescoping gauge, and then I'll place the telescoping gauge into the cylinder bore with the arms completely compressed. I'll slightly loosen the lock screw to let the arms press out against the cylinder, and then lock the screw back into place once I am happy with how this tool is sitting in the cylinder. Lastly, I'll use my micrometer to measure the telescoping gauge so I know an accurate measurement of my cylinder bore. For all of my cylinder bore measurements, I used a 2 to 3 inch micrometer. Here is my measurement for D1. Remember that I used a 2 to 3 inch micrometer for my measurement. The D2 measurement will be perpendicular to the crankshaft and about 3/4 of an inch into the cylinder bore. Remember to take your time as you're using your telescoping gauge in the cylinder bore so that you get an accurate reading. Here is my measurement for D2. Using this diagram, you'll continue on with your measuring of the cylinder bore to complete D3, D4, D5, and D6. Here is my D3 measurement. This was my D4 measurement. This is what I measured for D5. Lastly, my measurement for 6. Now with D1 through D6 measured, we need to calculate the average bore diameter. To calculate the average, we'll simply add D1 through D6 and divide by the total number that we added by, so that would be 6. Our next step for page 3 in the packet is honing our cylinder. Cylinder honing allows us to improve the surface of the cylinder wall so that it provides the right amount of crosshatch for good oil retention and ring support. The tools that are required for cylinder honing include a power drill, the hone, and some oil. In our shop, we have 2 different types of hones. We have the flex adjustable hone and the ball hone. To begin the honing process, we're going to make sure our engine block is secured to our workstation. Next, we'll spray a little bit of oil on the cylinder walls. Next, using our drill and our flex adjustable hone, we'll recondition the cylinder walls. To get that perfect 45-degree crosshatch, you need to go up and down your cylinder walls at about a 1-second increment. You'll do this process for about 30 seconds. Now using a shop rag, I'll wipe down my cylinder wall and inspect to see if I got that 45-degree crosshatch. Your cylinder wall should look something like this. The red arrows have been added to help highlight the 45-degree crosshatch. We will again measure our cylinder wall in 6 spots to see what effect the cylinder honing had on our cylinder. Once again, I used a 2 to 3 inch mic for all my cylinder bore measurements. Here is my measurement for D1. This was a measurement for D2. the post-cylinder honing D3 measurement. This is what I measured at D4. The measurement for D5 was this. Lastly, the measurement for D6 post-honing. Just like the before cylinder honing measurements, we need to again calculate the average bore diameter for after honing. Next, we will calculate and measure the piston to cylinder wall clearance. We need to begin by measuring our piston skirt diameter. To measure my piston, I used a 2 to 3 inch micrometer, just like the cylinder bore. To find the piston skirt diameter, we'll simply take our micrometer and measure across the bottom of the piston skirt to see how wide it is. This is what my micrometer read for the piston skirt diameter. To find the micrometer measurement for the piston to cylinder clearance, we'll simply take the piston diameter and subtract that from the before honing bore average. The last measurement we'll make on page 3 of our packets is the feeler gauge measurement for the piston to cylinder clearance. The first thing we need to do is start by taking off the piston rings. To complete this task, we'll need to use the piston ring expander. To use the piston ring expander, hold the expander in one hand and the piston with the ring still on it in the other. Now with the piston ring end gap pointing towards you, support the piston ring all the way around with the expander and slightly squeeze to remove the piston ring. As you take the rings off your piston, make sure to be careful so you don't accidentally break your rings, and make sure to mark your rings as you remove them so you know how to reinstall them later on in the quarter. Here is another view of using the piston ring expander to remove a piston ring from this piston. Now to finish the feeler gauge measurements for the piston to cylinder clearance, I will insert the piston into the bore and place a feeler gauge in between the piston and the bore, measuring the clearance. This is the feeler gauge that I was able to fit between the piston and the cylinder wall. The last question you need to answer on page 3 is, did the honing repair any cylinder taper or any damage that was found in the cylinder? You will answer this question by comparing your pre and post honing numbers and by comparing the images above. On the left hand side is our pre image, on the right hand side is our post image.